I'm here today because I realized that even though we've been talking about raw and cooked diet for the past 20 years, we still have some questions, and I would love to answer them and clarify some of the issues that you've been faced with. And the topics today would be about nutritional balance, about whether to feed raw or cooked diet, and also about supplements and whether they are needed or not. Also about special diets for health issues such as allergies and diarrhea, inflammatory bowel disease, and other concerns. Also, I'll be talking about picky eaters and how to feed smaller dogs. I will also mention and talk about the cost of feeding your dog healthy food. Also, creating meal plans and how I feed my dog packs and how I approach this whole healthy diet topic. Also, we'll be talking about safety concerns and specific and special ingredients in food and the questions that you have around that. So buckle up because there's a lot of topics today and I'll do my best to answer them as in detail as possible. And if you have any questions, you can always ask in comments or email us through the website at peterdubias.com. So the first topic of today will be around balanced diet and making sure that you're feeding your dog healthy, balanced diet and the core principles about doing that. When it comes to feeding dogs, I like to take the same approach as feeding myself, understanding and recognizing the basic principles of healthy food, and then including a lot of variety in different meats and vegetables and the healthy foods for dogs. So try to think of what dogs would eat in nature. It would be species, so-called species appropriate diet, emphasizing fresh food, whole foods, that is either raw or gently cooked. And I know that many of you are still concerned about raw diet and whether it's safe for dogs. And I will touch the topic later on in this recording. But when it comes to the ingredients, there's a tool that is called the Recipe Maker, and you can find it at recipemaker.peterdubias.com. And it will kind of show you the different ingredients and meats and vegetables and fruits that you can feed and what the options are. You know, some of you may have access to only a few different kinds of protein. Others will have a whole variety. I find that in North America, the range of proteins is a little lower or limited. When I go to Europe, I can see that there are all sorts of different meats and proteins there. But I'm going to talk a little tiny bit about the proteins that I choose and why, and the ones that I try to avoid. So, you know, when it comes to meats, there's some differences in the quality of meats, whether they contain more or less fat, whether they're obviously red meats or white meats. And in the Recipe Maker, if you click on the information icon, it'll give you more description and more information about the particular meat. If you have a dog that tolerates red meat, you have obviously a few different options, anywhere from beef, bison, buffalo, deer, elk, and then kangaroo, and some other more exotic meats. Lamb is also really good, except it does have higher fat. So when you're looking for food for dogs that have, let's say, pancreatitis issue, you would be looking for foods that are lower in fat. Deer is an excellent example for low-fat meat. When it comes to white meat or poultry, I like to feed chicken, duck, rabbit. Those are the most common ones. Turkey is also really good. And it also will calm your anxious or nervous dog down because it does have tryptophan. And we all know what happens with us when we eat turkey around Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's basically the basic proteins. And then, you know, there are some others like ostrich and pheasant, quail. All these different ones are suitable for dogs. I know that many of you often ask about fish and whether you should feed fish and how much and so on. And I like to feed fish, but don't feed it in large amounts, not more than once a week. And the main reason is that there are higher levels of mercury in fish. We have done thousands and thousands of hair testing and hair key tests with our customers and clients and learned that dogs that are on fish diet actually have higher levels of mercury. And dogs that are on high mercury diets, such as tuna or mackerel or something like that, can have such high mercury levels that they can actually start having toxicity symptoms. I've seen dogs that have seizures and epilepsy having high mercury levels quite frequently. When it comes to salmon, salmon is a great fish and it's moderate in mercury, so it would be suitable to feed once a week or so. Except there's a huge difference between farm salmon and wild salmon. Obviously, there's also an issue with sustainability and overfishing and all that. But if you do decide to feed salmon, please feed salmon that is wild, considering your dog's health. Sardines are great fish, except I've been kind of questioning their safety because in the past, around 2012-13, I started seeing elevated levels of strontium in the hair testing. And some people started to suspect that this may be because of the Fukushima disaster and the fact that sardines actually hatch and spawn around Japan often. And when you buy sardines from the main companies and brands, it doesn't necessarily mean that European sardines come from Europe. They may be coming from Asia and other places. So just keep it in mind. And if you have any questions around the safety of the fish, you have two options. You can measure your dog's hair test, and hair is actually one of the easy, simple ways of getting a rough idea whether your dog has been exposed to higher levels of mercury or not. Other proteins, eggs, are great cooked or raw. When it comes to raw eggs, the egg whites may inhibit digestion and some of the digestive enzymes, so just be careful about that. Some people like to feed tripe, and I'm all for it, except don't consider that being fully nutritional value or full nutritional value similar to meat. It's not, because it's basically collagen and some elastin and fibers, but it's not really the same as muscle meat. Because we are talking about how to balance your dog's diet, we need to have a conversation about whether vegetables and fruits are needed or whether you should be just feeding your dog meat. And dogs in nature actually do eat plant materials. You have seen your dog, I'm sure, eating grass, and some people think that it's not normal, but it is actually quite normal for them to balance the nutritional profile and balance the pH of their blood and their body. And dogs eat grass on a regular basis and some other plants and also berries and some other things that they find, beetles and bugs and whatever they can find if they roam free. But because our dogs mostly don't roam free, and I trust that you don't let your dog run around the village or town, we have to make decisions for them, what is good and what is not. Again, you can go to the Healthy Recipe Maker at recipemaker@petertobias.com. Actually, the website is recipemaker.petertobias.com, and look at the recommended veggie list. There are some vegetables that I really like giving, and there have been also some adjustments in our recommendations. In the past, we used to say that cruciferous, such as cabbage, cauliflower, and broccoli, may not be good because they would affect the thyroid function and the levels of thyroid hormone. But in practice, we've never seen that. And there are huge benefits of broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage and cauliflower. Hence, I use them quite readily and often for my dog packs. And I add some others, like I really like greens. I really like leafy greens to make sure that they're from safe sources and they're organic, ideally. I also use carrot tops. Dogs love carrot tops. Most dogs actually do, and Pax does too. When it comes to carrots as root vegetables, dogs don't really have the greatest ability to digest them, and they also contain a lot of carbohydrates. So just go light on carrots, but carrot tops are all fine. I love cilantro because it does reduce mercury levels. I love dill. Dandelion leaves are amazing for reducing or helping the liver to cleanse and improving digestion and serving as prebiotics, the food for probiotic bacteria. I love green beans. I love kale, green peas. You can even add mint and parsley. Parsley is amazing because it is rich in chlorophyll, which is a blood-building component. Swiss chard and spinach, I like to go a little lighter on it because it does have higher amounts of calcium oxalate. When it comes to beets, again, I would prefer cooked beets because of digestibility, but that's all fine. I Do add some seaweed, which is great if it's safe. Again, be careful about microplastic and be careful about the source of the seaweed. Sprouts, amazing, especially broccoli sprout, which has sulfur-based components and compounds like sulforaphanin, and they're known to have anti-cancer qualities or properties. Squashes, turmeric, sweet potatoes, all great. And zucchini, I like zucchini as well. I like wheatgrass and yams. All those are great combination. Make sure that you actually base your vegetable proportions on the leafy greens and maybe cruciferia, and then add some starchier vegetables. You can mix it up every day, different vegetables, whatever you have in the fridge and is left over, or you feel like giving your dog and you're not going to use yourself. That's a perfect way to optimize your budget, especially if you are concerned about the cost, and making sure that your dog gets what he don't eat, or you share with your dog what you feed for yourself, or what you put in your food, and then share a little bit with your dog. So that's all about vegetables. And one more thing, I feed vegetables mixed in meat most of the time. Some dogs are fine if you put some omega oils and some olive oil on top of vegetables, they would actually eat it. There may be also some questions about avocados. Avocados are safe for dogs if you don't feed the pit. Obviously, the pits are, you have to be very careful about the pit and also the peel. You don't give your dog the peel. You can also give some lentils. There have been some discussions about whether lentils or cooked lentils are safe for dogs. Now we know that some of the studies that were done in the past were not really valid or were not conclusive when you look at the data and the volume and so on. So I do give the occasional lentils or beans to my dog, but not in large amounts. I see that he doesn't digest it as well as meat. You may think of grain, rice. I don't like giving rice because it does have high levels of arsenic. When it comes to quinoa, I notice my dog, Pax, doesn't really digest it as well. But it is actually safer than, let's say, rice. And the reason why rice has so much arsenic in it, it's usually grown in Asia and the waters are polluted. And that's how arsenic gets in rice. And the same applies to you. If you can choose between quinoa or rice, always use quinoa. Garlic. Garlic is safe for dogs in small amounts. The idea that garlic would cause anemia or some sort of blood disorder is actually not true in the amounts that we feed. Onions, we do not give dogs onion because it can cause sickle cell anemia, and it's a little bit more significant. But small amounts of garlic are good, and dogs love it as well. So that's all for the vegetable part. So now we are at organs. Organs. Should we feed them? Should we not? What kind? And should they be frozen or not, or cooked, and so on? Personally, I give organs only on occasion when I can get them and when I know that they're from a good source, organic source. Because I do give Pax the essential supplements such as omegas and minerals and vitamins and probiotics. I have not really seen, and in other dogs, I have not seen a huge difference between dogs that do get organs and they don't. And if you can find them and get them, that's great. You can give somewhere around 5 to 10% of organs of the overall volume of your food. But if you can't find them, don't stress, because if you give your dog essential supplements and support and your dog is healthy otherwise, I think that it should be fine. We ourselves don't eat organs very often. Most people don't. And we thrive and survive and do fairly well. So, this is something that you can just kind of keep in mind, that it's not necessary to feed organs. The organs that I would recommend feeding, if we find them, are gizzards, kidneys, maybe heart, lungs are fine, tripe. But again, tripe is more collagen and some fibrous tissue than real nutrition. Some people are concerned about liver. And I recently wrote an article about liver. You can find it on my website at peterdubias.com. The main conclusion in the article is that many sources online suggest that we should be very, very careful about feeding liver because it can generate vitamin A toxicity. But when I look at the data of the only study that is available online, it was clear, or it made me understand that volume and the amount of liver that we would have to feed our dogs to actually generate toxicity is much higher than we originally believed. So be careful mainly about giving dehydrated liver treats, because the volume is about 3 to 4 times higher of vitamin A in dehydrated liver. So just be careful about giving too many dehydrated treats. There are so many options other than liver, so just keep it in mind. Spleen is also good, but again, it really depends where the organs come from. And I forgot to tell you in the meat and veggie portion, my rule of thumb is that I try to feed my dog about 50 to 70% meat and bones, meaning that if you have meat in the fridge, and if you're planning to feed meat, you don't need to give as many bones. You don't need to give bones every day. You can give bones 2 to 3 times a week, and you can give bones about 2 to 3 times a week, and I'll talk about them later. But roughly about 50 to 70% of meat and bones, and the rest organs and vegetables. Some people like to feed less vegetables, so maybe about 10%. I feed somewhere around 20-25%. Pax likes it, and I give him extra nutrients. We have a garden that we use for his veggies, and I also make sure that the veggies are well washed and that there is no parasites or slugs, because in some regions it can be a serious problem. So that's all about the proportions and also about organs. So now we have a topic of very heated discussions, and that's bone feeding. And the first question that I'd like to answer is whether it is safe and whether it's good to feed our dogs raw bones or not. Now, the first thing I need to remind you that you should be feeding only raw bones. Cooked bones are dangerous. They're not digestible, and you should avoid your dog eating or prevent your dog eating cooked bones. When it comes to raw bones, there are some bones that are good for your dog and other bones that are not as good, because they may cause dental fractures or obstruction. So what are the right bones for your dog? The right bones are the ones that are raw and that are the right size for the right size of the size of your dog. When it comes to bone feeding, it's been inspired by nature. All canines eat bones in nature. They don't really debone the birds or the rabbits or the deer. They basically eat whatever they can, and that's something to remember. And when it comes to the digestive tract of wild versus domesticated dogs, it's the same thing. You would not be able to recognize the histologic differences. Actually, there are no histologic differences between wild canines and domesticated dogs. The first benefit of feeding raw bones is that they keep your dog's teeth healthy. I've had 2 dogs in my life, and none of them had to go for dental cleaning under anesthesia, because I feed bones, and I feed the right bones that actually keep my dog's teeth healthy. And the little front canine teeth, they may build up a little bit of calculus or tartar, and I just usually take a scaler and scale them. And, I train dogs and I train dog lovers to handle their dog's teeth from puppyhood. So they're actually used to getting their dogs, getting their teeth handled and cleaned. The important part is that small, medium, and large dogs need different bones for different purpose. So when you look at, for example, small dogs, they will do well on chicken necks or duck necks, chicken backs, chicken wings, or chicken legs. They're all really good. Now, in a little Chihuahua or little Yorkie, chicken backs will actually have cleaning effect on their teeth. But if you give it to a large dog, the chicken backs are almost too soft for dogs to really scrape and scale their teeth, especially the premolars, which build up a lot of tartar normally on processed food, but also sometimes on raw diet if bones are not given. When it comes to medium dogs, again, lamb shanks or beef ribs are my preferred dental cleaning bones. But when it comes to play, you may also give those to dogs. Medium and large dogs also are prone to dental fractures if you give them big marrow bones. So if you have a bone that is really thick and has a really thick wall, and your dog is strong, they can crack their teeth. And I've seen that many times. So be careful. especially with marrow bones, because they are not that safe for medium and large, especially large sized dogs. And I see that often, that people think that it's okay, but I've seen so many problems that I would like to caution you from feeding large bones to medium and large dogs. Now, if you have any questions, you can just go to my website and type in bones, Peter Tobias. There's a nice chart. Actually, I'm going to show it to you right here. This chart is available on the website, and you can just put it on the fridge and instruct all your family members that these are the bones that your dog gets, and you can even circle them there. If you feed your dog edible bones, such as chicken bones and so on, and once again, they're super safe because they're fully digestible. Your dog's stomach acids will digest them, and then they pass into the intestinal tract, basically pre-digested. So in 25 plus years of recommending raw diet, I have not had one single dog that would come back with obstructive disease or problem due to feeding raw or eating raw bones, unless the dog got into cooked bones, which would be a problem, right? So just remember that the feces of dogs that eat raw bones, the edible bones, would be more crumbly and hard. And that's actually not a problem, especially because hard feces help to massage the anal glands and express the anal glands. And it is also good for strengthening the muscle layers of the intestinal tract. The only other thing I would like to say is never cook bones, never feed or offer smoked bones. Whenever possible, get your bones from non-medicated sources or organic sources. And that's all about bones. The next topic of today would be fruit. And there are some fruits that are obviously very healthy, not only for dogs, but also people, such as blueberries and some berries. There are some fruits that we should never give our dogs, such as grapes or raisins. I give Pax fruit on occasion. I like to give him frozen blueberries because he likes it. He's been a big fan of frozen blueberries since he was a puppy. The first day I got him, I offered him blueberries and he loved them. So I give it to him quite often. Now, there are some questions whether fruit should be fed with protein or without protein. And there are two schools of thought. One that says never feed fruit with protein because fruit has different digestive time and it can ferment in the stomach if it's fed with the protein. But then recently I started seeing some sources that say and suggest that if you feed fruit separately from proteins, that the glucose curve actually rises much more rapidly than if you feed fruit with protein. So I've been kind of testing and trying it on myself, on my own. And I personally feel that maybe there is not much difference when it comes to the practical kind of feeding fruit and protein together. And it may be better if we don't give our dogs a little glycemic shock by giving them too much fruit at once and not feeding with protein. So I'm a little more relaxed about it. I think that as time progresses, we'll be a little smarter about it. No matter what you give berries mainly and fruit that is healthy, full of antioxidants and organic and not sprayed chemically or somehow preserved or dehydrated. So fresh berries and fresh food would be good with some exceptions. So that's all about fruit. And the one thing that I would like to mention is never feed your dog before a dog walk. The main reason is that dogs are prone to stomach bloat, especially when they have full stomach. I've seen stomach bloats being much more common in dogs that eat kibble, because kibble-fed dogs have much more flaccid, weaker stomach, and it may be more prone to dilation and twisting. However, even in fit dogs that are on raw food, I caution you, never run your dog after feeding for at least 3 hours after feeding. I give Pax his meal right after the morning walk, and I feed him once a day, which makes it much easier. But if you like to feed your dog twice a day, just remember, never feed them before dog walk. And that's all about the diet kind of summary. And I will talk to you a little bit about how to recognize whether your dog is heavy or how much food to feed and all that. So that's the next part. So one of the most common questions that I get asked is about how much food dogs should get. my rule of thumb is, and this will maybe a little confusing for you, my American friends. My rule of thumb is that if your dog weighs, for example, 50 pounds, then you multiply this by 10 and it's 500 grams. So the starting amount for 50-pound dog would be about 500 grams, which is slightly over a pound of food. Other dogs may have a higher requirement. Sporting breeds, highly active breeds, they need sometimes even double the amount. And the best way to determine how much really your dog needs is to start with the starting amount and then see whether in 2-3 weeks they're getting thinner or heavier. And how we assess it, and again, there is like a really nice chart on my website, and I'll show it here to you. How you assess your dog is you feel their ribs and make sure that you can still count them. And the backbone and the hip muscle should be nicely muscled. If you see that your dog is kind of bony, and if you give your dog a shower or a bath and you see the ribs, that may be a little bit more on the thin side. If you cannot count the ribs, then your dog is too heavy. So if you see your dog being too heavy, you reduce the food by 25% and reassess in about 2 to 3 weeks and see whether your dog has been losing weight. Obviously, you can use the scale. That's another way to go. But I can't really tell you exactly how much each dog or your dog should weigh. I actually go with the feel. And if I feel and count the ribs and your dog is not too thin, that would be probably the best way to go. And again, if your dog is too thin, you up the food by 20-25%. And my experience is that, let's say, border collies and some sporting breeds need up to double the amount. And some other breeds that are more leisurely and don't like to be active, they may need less than the recommended amount, the starting amount. If you have any questions, there is a nice blog on my website. I think it's called How Much to Feed Your Dog, and you can get more details there. Do smaller dogs have different dietary requirements than larger dogs? The answer is yes and no. When it comes to composition of diet, not really. When it comes to metabolic rate, smaller dogs have higher metabolic rate, so they may eat more food per pound of body weight. But it really is individual. And in the previous sections, I mentioned how to find out whether your dog is overweight and underweight. When it comes to supplements and vitamins, obviously we change and adjust the doses based on your dog's body weight. But otherwise, the requirements are pretty much the same. There may be some variables when it comes to bones, the size of the bones and so on, but you can refer to the bone segment and you will find the answer. What is the difference between feeding sporting breeds or dogs and working dogs and companion pets? Well, the main difference is volume, because pets and dogs that just kind of leisure around and go for a walk or two a day, they obviously will not need as many calories as dogs that are working. Again, the most important part is to assess and evaluate whether your dog is overweight or not. But overall, there may be slightly different and higher demand for nutrients and vitamins in sporting breeds and working dogs. But generally, the principles are the same, because whether you have a couch potato or working dog, they have pretty much the same identical digestive tract. Is it necessary to buy organic food for our dogs? Well, to be honest, ideally, all agriculture should be organic, because it's better for the environment, for our health, or dogs' health. But the reality is different, and organic food sometimes is quite expensive. So I choose to feed meats that are either non-medicated or organic if I can. I also have a little arrangement with a hunter who hunts invasive deer, so that's actually something that I really like to do. But it's also important to provide variety. So organic is important. I think clean meat from good sources is important. Ideally non-medicated. I wouldn't buy the cheapest on the market. I wouldn't buy meats from countries like China or other places where you really don't know what goes in. But even in the United States, we know that meat may be full of hormones and additives. So you have to be careful, educate yourself, and ideally buy non-medicated or organic whenever possible. But again, if you are to choose between processed kibble and regular meat and vegetables, I would always go for the wholesome food than processed food. How can we avoid GMO and additives? Well, read the labels and feed whole food, wholesome foods. there is nothing more important than supporting the agricultural practices that we agree with. And, I don't really like industrial agriculture. I myself do not eat meat for those reasons. As a vet, I had to go through inspection of meat training and courses. I've been to slaughterhouses. I think everyone who eats meat should go to slaughterhouses, but ultimately we all feed our dogs meat. So try to make sure that you feed free-range animals, that you support sustainable agriculture, that you do not support GMO and other practices that may actually backfire down the road. So that's my philosophy. Obviously, you're an adult. You have to do what is the best for you and your dog and what you think is actually right. Someone asked me whether perna mussel, green lip mussel, is good for joints. Of course it is good. But also remember that if you use perna mussel with other ingredients, they act in synergy. And if you ferment them, the bioavailability is about 7 to 10 times higher. And that's why I fermented almost all the ingredients, I think 11 out of 13, in joint powder and joint butter. And so far we've gotten really surprising and great results. I myself used to have a shoulder issue. I had it for maybe a year and a half. And since I started taking joint butter, I have full range of motion. I go to fitness classes and pretty much have no restrictions. So it's been great. And we've been getting some really nice feedback from me and from other customers and dog lovers. Someone asked me whether zeolite is good for detoxifying toxins from vaccines. Personally, I do not know because I have not used zeolite for detox from vaccines. What I've used in the past is homeopathic remedies, such as Thuja, T-H-U-J-A, 200C, and I usually give it post-vaccines. If dogs and cats needed to be vaccinated, then I would use Thuja. And also some symptoms may come up after vaccination. And again, this is one of the best remedies. I use liver tune as a general detox that is also designed or formulated to get rid of heavy metals. So that's another thing that you can do as a kind of prevention for vaccine side effects. Remember that vaccines don't need to be given as often. For example, distemper and parvo vaccine can last for 7 to 10 years or maybe even lifetime. So I usually recommend doing vaccine titers or antibody titers that will give you an idea whether the vaccination is needed or not. I personally do not choose to vaccinate against distemper and parvo in dogs that have antibodies. And my dog Pax and Sky, they were never vaccinated against parvo and distemper because they had antibodies from puppyhood all the way through. So, we've been kind of misled by vaccine manufacturers that all dogs need vaccines. If we have a puppy and the puppy has maternal antibodies from their mother and you actually take them out and socialize them moderately with other dogs, then they will build up the immunity during the time they're still protected with maternal immunity. And this has been a really eye-opening experience in the course of the past 30 years for me to see that nature actually has looked after immunity really well if we don't interfere with it. And unfortunately, most vaccines are done at 8 or 12 weeks, and the immune system is still not really mature to produce their own antibodies. And if you give vaccine, the vaccine actually latches onto the maternal antibodies and can neutralize them and leave our dogs less protected. So it's a little bit of a paradox. I try to educate people. I know that everyone or most people have good intention, no matter what side of the belief and discussion they're on. But my experience is that if you measure antibodies at 12 weeks and they're positive, there is sufficient antibodies, then you can socialize your dog and most likely they'll be fine. The exception is rabies for import, obviously for travel. You need to have that and there is no discussion. So there is an article that I wrote on my website at peterdubais.com. It gives you detailed description of the safer vaccination protocols and immunity protocols. We've been very lucky as a company because I took the route of not growing as fast, but making sure that our products are high quality, that we never compromise the quality of the ingredients. And we also do not need to answer to shareholders because many companies, other companies are owned by either equity companies or shareholders, and they are in the business of making money. For us, We wanted to have the best products out there. I really love doing what I do. I just I just can't explain it. I know that I could retire, but I just don't want to, because this is so much fun. And seeing the difference we are able to make and help you and support you is really fantastic. Omega-3 oil called Feel Good Omega. And Feel Good Omega has a history of a few challenges at the beginning. It took me 2 years to actually find the right source, because once you start looking into different sources of omega-3s like fish or krill, you learn that they're not exactly sustainable or pure. When it comes to fish, a lot of the oils are made from farm salmon or farm fish. And if it's made of wild oil and fish, then again, sustainability is an issue. Krill is at the beginning of the food chain for all the marine mammals. So, looking at preserving our oceans and all the marine creatures, it's not the best way to actually source omega-3. Now, based on my knowledge, most of the algae-based omega oils, omega-3s, are GMO. And if they're not exactly as balanced as one oil that I discovered, and that is calamari or squid oil. Now, squid oil is really high in DHA, which is great for the brain and nerve function, but it is also high in EPA, which is the anti-inflammatory and cell repair essential amino acids. Now, some of you may be wondering whether flaxseed oil is good. It is unfortunately rich only in alpha-linoleic acid, and that is not the final kind of essential fatty acid that our dogs need. So we need the EPA and DHA, and those are the ones that you should be looking for. Now, it's super important for you to consume the bottle within a few weeks after opening, mainly because we make the product by preserving it with nitrogen gas that will prevent it from oxidization. But as soon as you open it, the oil would go rancid if you let it sit in the fridge for months and so on. It's made in Norway in a small family company, amazing company. I went there in 2017 to visit the facility, and we've been obviously in touch and communicating. A great company, family business, basically. And I'm super happy that we've been able to continue working with them and make the oil in what I see as one of the best facilities available. And again, see supplements as concentrated food. See it as a smorgasbord for your dog and yourself to get what you need. Nobody expects to build a house or a bike without the parts, and our body cannot exist without the nutrients. And because of food depletion, we really have to focus on supplementing our diet. These are not drugs. These are not pills. This is concentrated food. The rest is left up to you. You have to decide whether you want to try them or not. You have unlimited money-back warranty. So if you don't like the product or your dog doesn't like them for whatever reason, you can return them and it will give you full refund back. The next question that I would like to answer is about special diets for certain health conditions like kidney disease, liver disease, allergies, and so on. I'd like to start with kidney disease special diet because it's a good example of how pet food companies ignore the basics of research and science. Most dogs and cats who are diagnosed with kidney disease are put on low-protein diet. And very early on in my practice, I discovered that when I put my patients with kidney disease on low-protein diet, they muscle waste. And I was taught that the muscle wasting is actually related to the kidney disease. However, I discovered later on that feeding high-quality protein diet actually preserves the body's muscles and doesn't damage the kidneys in any way, shape, and form. The only time that you may want to reduce protein is in the final stage of kidney disease when dogs and cats are already, very compromised, and you may kind of focus on reducing the protein metabolites. But otherwise, feeding high quality protein diet actually makes dogs and cats with kidney disease thrive. And I pride myself with just kind of being daring to start making these recommendations maybe 20 years ago. I've seen complete turnaround in the outcome of treating dogs with kidney disease and cats with kidney disease. If you have any questions about that, you can go to my website and look up the blog and the article on kidney disease. I won't be able to talk about all sorts of different special diets that are available, but I would like to mention special diet for the treatment of allergies that has hydrolyzed protein and just kind of read some of the ingredients that are on the label. Cornstarch, hydrolyzed chicken liver, hydrolyzed chicken, powdered cellulose, which is basically wood chips, soybean oil, calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate, and a whole bunch of additives. So basically, this food is mainly cornstarch. Now we know that starches and complex carbohydrates turn into single or simple carbohydrates, and they can cause all sorts of different metabolic challenges and metabolic syndrome. Now, this is, to me, not a special diet to keep our dogs healthy, but make them more sick. And I still do not understand why brands like these are sold and why they're recommended. Now, you as a dog lover have to protect your dogs. If your dog has allergies, remember that allergies are just a symptom. Allergies are a disease of the immune system. And if you have a problem with the immune system, usually what you need to do is to feed the right diet, try maybe different proteins, make sure that you detox, that you give proper probiotics, and that you also look at your dog's spine and aligned spine, because we discover that dogs sometimes itch and chew when their spinal column is actually affected and maybe spastic or injured. Then they can lick their paws when they have issues with collar injuries, or lumbar area can often be acting up. And as a result, dogs can have allergic conditions, skin issues, and so on. Look it up on my website because this is a really interesting read. And if you have an allergic dog, I hope that this will be very helpful. But most of all, read the labels. And if it's not what dogs would eat in nature, ideally do not give it. I know that this is hard to hear, but that's just the nature of the current situation. Now, the last diet that the special diet that I will be talking about is liver disease diet. Again, when you have liver issues, it's good to lower fat in most situations and feed leaner meats. But most of the time, dogs do really well on either cooked or raw diet with vegetables that are beneficial to the liver. One of them is, for example, dandelion leaves. There are also some herbs and medicinal plants in liver tune, so make sure that you give liver tune. And I've seen liver disease and liver enzymes decline and get back to normal after proper dietary management. Again, just to kind of emphasize that special diets that are sitting on the shelf for 6 to 12 months and are heavily processed and have ingredients such as cellulose or starches and soybean oil and hydrolyzed protein, this is not something that the body will thrive on. This is something that your dog will survive on, but definitely not be well. Meal planning and preparation. Now, I know that some of you are really worried and concerned about your dogs, making sure that their diet is complete. But if you look at how we eat or our children eat, we never measure all the nutrients exactly. And this is another kind of fallacy that pet food companies made us believe, that we have to measure exactly every proportion while they put cornstarch and wood chips in their feed. So the other issue is that some of these ingredients are not digestible. So you can measure certain nutrients, let's say in cornstarch, but it's not the same as if you were feeding vegetables or meat and diet as nature intended. So I really like to give variety of meats, some organs, some vegetables, bones. And I mentioned that in the early stage or the early part of the recording. So again, don't worry about measuring everything exactly. Just offer your dog balance, smorgasbord of nutrients, including supplements, and you should be fine. And if you have any questions, you can always email us. I have no doubt that you love your dog. And at the same time, I understand that sometimes pet food, dog food, meat, vegetables are just expensive. And some of you are wondering what you can do, whether there is some sort of specialty kibble or that can be fed and with the same results. And I think that any processed food will not provide you with the same quality nutrients as either cooked or raw foods. Also, the enzymes and the vitamins are preserved much better in raw food or even in cooked food than dehydrated, bagged food that sits on the shelf for months before it's fed. So if you are restricted when it comes to your budget, just try to mix foods with fresh ingredients as often as you can. And there's an amazing book by my colleague and friend, Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib, that has all sorts of different recipes and advice that is really amazing. And I just don't want to repeat something that they've done so beautifully. The book is called The Forever Dog Life. You can find it in all the bookstores online and regular bookstores, and it's a New York Times bestseller. So I'm sure that you'll enjoy reading it and being inspired. And that's all for today. I hope that you enjoyed the session. I really enjoy recording because it's my way of kind of releasing all the frustration over the years and seeing how misinformed we all have been about certain parts of medicine. I really love empowering you. I love passing on what I've learned. And I encourage you to be courageous. I encourage you to be questioning what is being done and why it's being done. And I really think that the times when we could rely on healthcare practitioners only are gone, and we really need to educate ourselves. Veterinary medicine has become more corporate. There are different corporate holders of veterinary clinics and owners. They're more interested in financial gains than the core focus on the patient. And that's just a fact. And we can't really change that. But what you can change is to educate yourself, empower yourself, and also choose veterinarians who are not on commission or production basis pay, and learn as much as you can. If you have not subscribed so far, please go to my website at petertobias.com. That's the only thing that I would like to ask you for. And explore, search for different topics, and email me if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and take care.